Hi, August. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just prepping, so I'll just go back on and thinking. So I'll just go back on silent. What I will do is I figured out how to make everybody a panelist that's in the selection committee, so I will do that. And it sounds like you have full control as well, because you're in webinar organizer as well, are you?
Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, you're in here with me as staff. Okay, this is intuitive. I mean, I've used it before, but like I feel like now that we're in remote, you have to use a lot more functionality than we ever did. So it makes me very nervous. Okay, I'm gonna mute and study.
Yep. Cool.
And I added the disclosures, the disclosure document, and the conflict of interest document into the calendar invite and sent it to everybody that way. So that's where everybody can find it.
Okay, great.
Hi all, it's almost 12:30. We'll give people a little bit more time to pop in. If you are a member of the review panel, you are given panelist status, so you should have control of your mute command. So if you could test that out, maybe if Akeem or Aaron or Susanna, if you could just let me know that you're here and that it's working, that will make me feel a lot more comfortable. Thanks.
Hi, this is Susanna. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Loud and clear. Thank you. Does somebody else,
Fantastic.
Aaron and Akeem? I know Nagesh and I have spoken. I know his is working. Akeem and Aaron, are you there?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, great.
Perfect.
Hey, it's Erin.
Right. Hi, Aaron. Good to hear your voice. I don't think we've met before, but yes, great.
Agreed.
Susanna too. I just think I've been sending calendar
Yes.
invites and questionnaires about when you can meet. So.
Well, thank you so much. That seemed like quite a headache to arrange that. Would you prefer us to be on a video?
If you want to share your video, that's fine. I'm not going to be able to see you because I'm going to be sharing. Can you see you can see my screen, and there's the PowerPoint deck right there.
Okay.
Great. But if you, sure, faces work too. So.
Hello.
Here I am.
Good afternoon, everyone.
All right, so we'll wait just a few minutes. I think there's probably a few more people. We did. Hey, Aaron. Okay.
I had to go back to my notebook and look at my notes from early February to figure out, to reflect back on the RPP panel, because it's been so long in coming, hasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I hope I provide you with some links and information to maybe help in your study. And I think part of the purpose of this meeting is to also level set on some of that. I think here is.
Yes. It was just like a flashback to a different world back in February.
I had to study and check my understanding as well. So, Sam, I think you're here as well. We've given you panelist status too, so you can control. You have control of the mic and the camera as well. Hi, Jen. Jen joined, and you're a panelist as well. Everybody that's on the review team is a panelist, and if there's anybody that comes through with the public, because the meeting is public, they'll be muted as just a regular attendee. So I think we're waiting on Rebecca, and then we can go ahead and get started. And Rebecca's been in and popped out, so. Jen.
Hi, John.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you, Nagesh.
Good to see you.
I may occasionally turn off my video as I'm going to eat my lunch. I should maybe do that now. Let me just do that for a second.
And Shauna, same thing for you. You can show your camera if you want to. You can mute and unmute because you're in panelist status too. Sam, if you can, I've not heard your voice yet, but if you can just let me know that your sound is working and everything, that's. Sam?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good. All right.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was having trouble with it. I had read GoToWebinar as WebEx and assumed I wouldn't have any setup issues. Apologies.
That's, hey, yeah, we all have master's degree and master's degree in functionality. So, all right, and I think Rebecca is here. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome. We've tried to get together for quite some time now, and it's good to see all of your faces. I'm going to share my screen, and you have the opportunity to mute and unmute as you wish. And then if members of the public join us, since this is a public meeting, they will be in attendee mode, and they don't have those same privileges. So we can keep going. So our objectives today for this first meeting of the review committee is to convene in accordance with the Research Practice Partnership Act. I also wanted to provide you with some orientation to the Act's requirements and our actions to date to make sure that we're all working from the same understanding and working from a consistent set of facts and documents. And the third objective is I wanted to use this as a foundational meeting to obtain alignment with you on norms and processes as we move towards a selection as required by law. So our agenda today is we will do a round of introductions next. We will do that overview of the RPP law. We'll move forward to norms and feedback, proposed process and feedback, and then we will conclude with some housekeeping items as we plan for our next meeting. So I will allow you to introduce yourself. So name, role, and sort of what background brings you to the panel, just very briefly. I think we'll start with our colleagues on the council. So Akeem, if you would like to start, and then we'll just move in order of the list on the slide.
Yeah, no problem. My name is Akeem Anderson. I am the committee director for the Committee on Education with DC Council.
Susanna?
Sorry, I need to unmute. Hi, I'm Susanna Groves. I work for the DC Council in the Budget Office, and I'm starting up a new research division. So I was asked to serve on the panel in that research capacity.
Hi, I'm Erin Roth. I work at the Office of the DC Auditor as the Director of Education Research.
And then we'll move over to the executive appointees. We'll start with Jen.
Great, thanks. Thank you. So hi, I'm Jen Comey. I'm the Director of Planning Analysis at the DME.
Hi team, I'm Rebecca Lamry. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Data Assessment and Research at OSSI.
Hi, I'm Sam Quinney. I'm the director of the lab at DC, which is an applied research team in the Office of the City Administrator.
And then OSSI staff that are helping with the administration of the panel. Nagesh, do you want to introduce yourself and sort of your role?
Sure, Nagesh Tamara, Assistant General Counsel at OSSI. Wear a number of hats there, including working in the FOIA space, as well as working with a number of public bodies, and so was asked to assist with this panel.
I'm Justin Tooley. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff at OSSI. My role has been working on this legislation throughout the legislative process, and then also helping lead our work in getting the notice of invitation completed and working with putting that out on the street and getting the applications. And then we'll be helping support the logistics of the panel. And then I believe Shauna maybe jumped on if she wants to introduce herself as well.
Hi everyone, Shauna Young, Chief of Staff at OSSI.
Great. So we'll take this opportunity to provide an overview in our actions to date on this project. So on January 24th, 2019, Mayor Muriel Bowser signed the District of Columbia Education Research Practice Partnership Establishment and Audit Act of 2018. And you'll see that hyperlink there for your reference that takes you to the enacted version of the law. That legislation outlined a process for the selection, the establishment, and the operation of an education research practice partnership in the District of Columbia. Broadly, the law does a few things. One, it establishes the DC Education RPP. It requires the mayor to enter into an agreement covering data collection, sharing, ownership, and confidentiality of the entity selected by this review panel. It requires the mayor to write a notice of invitation with a review process prescribed by council. It outlines membership of an advisory committee once the partnership is established, and it defines its duties. The act also establishes this review panel to convene. It prescribes its membership equally divided of 6 members equally divided between the executive branch and the council. And it also establishes a threshold for the selection of a partnership, which takes 2 representatives from the council and 2 representatives appointed by the mayor to agree on an entity. The act also requires the mayor to enter into an agreement 60 days after the selection of the partner by this panel. The mission of the RPP is as follows. It shall conduct independent education-related research and that supports the improvement of the district's public schools. The partnership will conduct research that identifies instructional practices that increase student achievement, equity, and school improvement, and uses rigorous methods to do that analysis. It provides the research necessary to inform and assess instructional practices in the District of Columbia. It will evaluate existing instructional practices to determine their impact on student achievement and progress. And it will also assist the district with research aimed to improve instruction and student outcomes in the district. The Research Practice Partnership will work with the advisory committee to develop and implement a research agenda that fulfills this mission. To be eligible as a partner, eligible applicants for the partnership include a university, college, or nonprofit organization, or it could be a consortium that combines a university, college, nonprofit organization for the purposes of the partnership. Eligible applicants for the partnership had to demonstrate that they can enter into this partnership for no fewer than 10 years. OSSI has taken a number of steps up to this point. In December 2019, we posted our notice of invitation. In January of 2020, we had a proposals webinar and question submission process, which I'll talk about a little bit later and tell you how you can find that information. In February 2020, we had our proposal submitted. We had to delay the convening of this partnership due to the ongoing public health emergency, but we are now here in late September, beginning of October to fulfill those requirements under the law. So the notice of invitation was drafted by the executive and transmitted to the council for feedback. The purpose of the notice of invitation was to provide context and background information, provide procedural logistics for submitting an application and asking questions, and also define the proposal's requirements. The notice of invitation was divided into 3 broad sections. First, there was a general information section that established context for what we are trying to do with the partnership. We provided some background, again, some additional detail on what the partnership would ideally look like. And then we also listed out and defined proposal requirements that had to be addressed in the applicant's submitted materials. The vast majority of the requirements for the content of the NOI were prescribed by the RPP Act. We received 3 proposals. I will read I did not list out the partners with each of the major applicants, but I will read those to you now. First was George Washington University. It's a consortium comprised of the American Institutes for Research, Child Trends, Howard University, and Policy Studies Associates. So that's the group that is with George Washington University. The second proposal came from the Urban Institute, in partnership with the American School of Education, Bellwether Education Partners, the Brookings Institution, the DC Policy Center, Empower K-12, Georgetown University, the George Washington University School of Public Policy and Public Administration, Howard University School of Education, Mathematica, Raise DC, Trinity Washington University, the University of the District of Columbia, the University of Maryland, and the University of Virginia Ed Policy Works. And the last applicant was Bitrick, and there were no underlying partners with that application. So additional resources for you, these are hyperlinks of content that's already located publicly on our website. So you can
Justin, sorry,
yeah.
can I ask a question, or maybe this will be covered later, but so what distinguishes the partner that you named, like George Washington University, from the other partners that are within that same consortium? Is that the sort of...
There's no distinction. What I was doing there was the application itself was submitted by George Washington University.
Okay,
and then I was outlining the partners that are working in tandem with them.
Okay, so that was my question. So the application was submitted by the bulleted organizations.
Yeah, yes. And then there were underlying groups that were too long to list on the slide, so I thought I would read them. And once you have access to the application, you will see all of that detailed.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
No problem. And then finally, there's additional resources that might help you as you conduct your duties. One, we have a draft of the notice of, or not a draft, but it was the notice of invitation that's located on the link. You can look at that at its entirety. We also have a pre-conference webinar that we held with applicants that were interested in submitting applications. That was their opportunity for them to meet us. We walked them through the notice of invitation. We walked them through the process for submitting their application. We walked them through the process of how to submit questions, and we answered some of their questions. And then finally, you'll see a hyperlink to website content of frequently asked questions. So this was a repository of all the questions that we submitted from the applicants through our question inbox. And then we wrote responses to everybody's questions, so it would be transparent back to everyone. I will pause there. That was a lot of content, sort of a 101, RPP 101. If I missed something, please feel free to share it or if you have any questions or want to discuss. All right. Well, we can always come back to those materials. Those are all there for your use throughout the process. So the next part of our agenda is on roles and norms. And this is an opportunity for us to level set on expectations for roles and how we're going to accomplish our collective task. So this slide, we did some thinking about what the roles, committee roles, and then OSSE facilitator roles, mine and Nagesh's role. So OSSE facilitator roles is we are providing administrative function to the review committee. We are trying to do the logistics of setting up the meetings, trying to make sure that you have a process so you can review applications, that you can provide feedback and deliberate and ultimately select those the partner. Also on the left, you'll have review committee roles. So one, we encourage you to participate. We encourage you to complete the tasks, which are reviewing, scoring, and then any additional steps that you decide to take to get to your decision. We ask you to deliberate and to work towards consensus as prescribed by the law. And then ultimately, we charge the review committee to ultimately fulfill its duty under the act, which is to select a partner. Are there any thoughts on these roles? Things that I left off, things that you want more detail, things you want to add?
Justin, maybe this is later on, but are there prescribed rules about how we come to that consensus? Or is there a voting mechanism or anything like that?
We have not outlined a procedure. That is something that we are open to your input on. We did not prescribe a procedure to do that. I have a general sort of outline of process, and if you want to add more detail to that, we're open to discussing to having that discussion.
Thanks.
Of course. Any other questions? Comments?
Can you remind me, so this is a public meeting, but will all of the deliberative meetings be public as well?
I'm going to defer to Nagesh on this to give you some background on the public meetings piece.
Yeah, so I mean, we have made the determination. Certainly, we can discuss it, but as an initial matter, we did determine that this is a public meeting because the law does prescribe that the committee, that this panel shall meet within 30 days. Obviously, that had been extended, and so relative to the deliberation part, certainly if we are talking about some of the proprietary or competitive information that's contained in the applications, or if there are legal questions that any one of you have, we would go into a closed session and be able to discuss that. But by and large, the deliberation would be conducted in a public forum, but there are obviously Open Meetings Act requirements for closing the meeting when discussing certain confidential matters that are within the purview of this panel. And I think, certainly we'd have to, once the applications and the submissions are released, we'll have a better sense. I think all of you will have a better sense of, where those lines will be sort of met.
Thanks, Nagesh. We also believe that the spirit of the law was to be pretty transparent about the process. The council outlined and the mayor approved a process, a pretty prescriptive process of how to move point to point to point. And all through the NOI process, all through the providing information to know where the process was going, we have been forthcoming with that content and putting it on our website. So we would like to continue in that spirit.
Justin, Nagesh has another question related.
Go ahead, Jen.
Are the 3 proposals going to be posted in entirety for the public?
That's a good question. Nagesh, I'll take a stab at this and then you can chime in to fill in any color. We received the 3 applications. When we convened, we sent out a letter to the applicants to let them know that we are convening. We did get a few emails here and there throughout the public health emergency, like what's the status, and we just answered that it was on pause. So we let them know that we're meeting. The second piece is that we are giving them the opportunity to go through their applications and to identify anything that might be proprietary, and that's what they're doing this time. I think we gave them about 10 days to take those steps, and we will do that consistent with our FOIA officer. We plan on providing you all the unredacted information, but then we also plan on putting the applications that, if there are any redactions in there, on the website for the public to consume.
Hey, Justin, question about that. If we get into topics and let's say we want to interview the applicants and we get into topics that are proprietary, I know there's a clause in the Open Meetings Act that protects them from discussing those pieces in an open format. So the question is, would our interviews, just to avoid that whole issue, would our interviews with them be subject to open meetings?
I'm going to defer to Nagesh on that detail. It might be a matter that we need to examine more closely, but go ahead, Nagesh.
Yeah, certainly the interviews, questions from the panel to any of the representatives that would be done in the public forum. If there are things that are of a proprietary nature, of a competitive nature, if we're discussing specifics around whatever the contractual obligations and in negotiating that contractual obligation, those would be subject to a closed session that's outlined in the Open Meetings Act. But again, I think it really depends on the nature of the topic, and certainly we want to be erring on the side of transparency, but obviously understanding that there may be things that impact the position of each. It's hard to say, each side also comes with a number of partnerships or two of the applications come with a number of application materials that are not just in and of itself, but also raise questions that are relative to their partnerships. So those are, again, types of things that we'd have to cross that bridge when we come to it, to determine what the level of questioning is. And certainly we can discuss those matters in private session to determine and make, as a panel, for you all to make a determination that this would be confidential and that this would be subject to a closed session rather than fully in the open.
All right, thank you.
This is Shauna at OSSI. I think as a procedural matter, we can also leave a standing executive closed session on agendas for that determination if it's needed, if it's determined that is needed as a procedural matter, and use it only as needed, just to give a sense of how a meeting logistics would go in that sense. And so then it would be transparent what, if and when in any given meeting it would be going into closed session and for what purpose. So that's for those of you who have served on other committees before. There's frequently a standing executive or closed session put on the agenda, and then it is used as needed, so that it's not required to have extra meetings or time before or after.
That's right. Yeah, agreed, Shauna. Thank you.
Going off that, I see that the session is being recorded. As under the Open Meetings Act, I don't know if it anticipated if meetings of this nature would then be posted to a website, or like what happens to the recording?
Nagesh, do you want to take
Typically, we wouldn't post the recording itself. We would just post minutes or detailed notes of that recording, but preserve it for internal purposes, or in the event that someone has requested that. We thought it was easier to record than to take detailed minutes of everyone's single person talking and whatnot. We can certainly transcribe those notes and post those within the 48-hour requirement.
Are there any other questions? We'll pause again, so feel free. I think this is working pretty well. So we'll move on to norms. So operational norms. So again, we've discussed this, that meetings are in accordance with the Public Meetings Act. We will work to establish meeting dates with the review committee at least 1 week in advance. Agendas and supporting deliverables will be submitted prior to the meeting. I will commit to 24 hours, but we'll also take feedback on that as well. For behavioral norms, we ask that you refrain from public comment on actions and deliberations outside of review committee meetings. We ask that you work towards the consensus required by the RPP Act. And we also ask that you do not share unredacted proposals outside of the review committee. Those were some broad operational and behavioral norms. So I think the question on the question that I would like to discuss now is, like, does this feel right? And are there any norms that might be missing that are worth discussing?
Go right to me, Jeff.
Okay.
Agree.
This is Shauna. I think one other thing that is implied here, but it is also that in terms of receiving inquiries or communications from outside parties about about the status of this deliberation, et cetera, that those should just, I think that's covered in behavioral norms under refrain from public comment, but it also means that public response to inquiries should be redirected back to the public meeting, and we would do that as well. For people who are asking about status or other details, should be referred back to public materials. That way everyone has equitable access to the information.
That sounds fine.
Justin,
I'm
not
sure you
sure
actually said.
if you,
Go
Go ahead,
ahead,
Jen,
you're probably
sorry.
gonna answer my question. No, you're probably gonna answer my question. Go ahead.
I was just, yeah, I would have Justin, if this, did we want to talk about NDA conflict of interest now, or is that something that we have? I can't remember where it was on the agenda.
So it's on the next steps piece, but if we want to
Okay.
engage, let's do the one slide about process, and then we'll be there. And then I think we can you can have sort of a more comprehensive view of your thinking. So this is what we're thinking.
Jen, did that answer your question?
Oh,
It was a little different. I just think the only thing is, so Justin, this is all, there is an RPP. I haven't looked at it in a while, but the RPP site on the OSSI webpage. And then I think if anyone sends me anything, I would send them to that and just forward it to you. Just saying, you're organizing this and acting as a facilitator. And if there's anything that seems reasonable, right?
That seems fun. I think sending those requests to me and Nagish would probably be most helpful, and we'll store those and we'll respond pointing them to the content on the website.
Thank you.
So moving on to proposed process. So we created this slide to just sort of give like a general framework timeline of how we might get from point A, where we are now, to point B, where we want to go and select an RPP partner. And this is open to feedback. This is just a high-level roadmap to get sort of to get the conversation started. So we're at meeting 1. We've convened, provide orientation. At the next meeting, we would provide access to the applications. We would provide a sample rubric for you to take a look at and to use. And we would provide a system for facilitating the review of that. Go ahead, I'm sorry. We would provide the sample rubric, and we would provide a system for facilitating the review of applications. So where would you put your scores? Where would you put your comments, etc. At the third meeting, we would present data from that initial review process. You would have the opportunity to deliberate. If you wanted to invite, since there are 3, if you wanted to invite, we said 2 applications, you could invite all of them. That would probably be another meeting. But if we said here the top 2 for further inquiry, if needed, if you wanted to have conversation with them to explain certain parts of their proposal, we could do that in the 2 following meetings. So 1 meeting for one group, another meeting for the other group. And then in the 6th meeting, we would have the selection of the RPP partner. So I think for discussions, does this sequence feel right? What steps are missing? What are your thoughts about timing? I think let's try to engage the first 3 bullet points first, and then go from there.
For the sample rubric, my understanding is we would have sort of some homework here where we would review, we would score ourselves, correct? And then bring that back to the group?
That's what I'm envisioning, yes. Like we would take, we like as sort of an operational matter, we would take the contents of the NOI. We would provide like a point system to those that you could use. And then we would go from there.
Got it. Yeah, my only other question was around, we're choosing the top 2. There are only 3. So, depending on where we land on those initial meetings, this may change. We may want to just interview all 3.
You could. I think that's the prerogative of what you read, and also one of them could be so exceptional, and you have the consensus required under the law to get there without any additional steps. That's also there. You'll see an asterisk by those meetings 4 and 5, and those will be that's up to you. But we just sort of like as sort of in our planning and how we're trying to like manage our capacity. We added those 2 meetings there because it also seemed like people might want to do that step as well.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hey, Justin, a couple of questions. Are you envisioning these meetings being once a month, or how's that, yeah, the timing on that?
So, I mean, if I had my way, I would love to get it done by the end of the year. It would be nice for us to be selected by the end of the year. I understand that.
Giving,
Huh?
I would like that too, given my timeline. But
Yeah. Yes. I think that, like, I would like to all lang syne this part of the process and move forward and leave it in 2020 and move on to 2021. I wouldn't say once a month. It sounds like there might, like, the meeting between now and the next meeting could happen. I hope to do that pretty quickly. The next meeting where you actually have the homework to read a lot of content and to score, it might take you, I think it's going to take you a longer than 2 weeks to do that, because you also have your full-time jobs. But then we could go and then select, if you choose to interview, that's also going to be dependent on them getting their people together and us setting it up and doing that. But I think that we, especially if we're in a virtual setting like this, we can pull that, we can hopefully pull that together by the end of the year, is my goal.
okay, I would, I'm curious to hear what other people are thinking in terms of the timeline too. I would prefer that as well, given that I do not anticipate working for the council in the next council period. And I don't want to have to go through the hassle of like switching all contact info for all of this stuff over to my personal email.
I would agree. That seems like a reasonable timeline as well.
I'd agree as well. I think that it seems like the biggest chunk is, as Justin mentioned, when we have to review the applications, but I don't see why meetings like 4 through 6 couldn't happen in a very short time window. And I think ideally the interviews, if they take place, should be very close together, so that we're in the same context and have the same memory of things.
Yes, I would also support that timeline.
Okay. Does anyone have any thoughts of this general sequence of things? I mean, we can flesh out how long an interview lasts, questions, procedures, whether you submit questions that are the same to both people ahead or not. Like, we can discuss that as time goes on, but as sort of a framework, is this kind of a general roadmap of how we're going to try to get to here to there? Okay.
I think my only one thing, Justin, I had 2 small questions. So the selection of RPP partner, are you imagining that we're going to reassess the rubric? So I have 2 questions that are related. Under the meeting 3, where it says present data, are you imagining us scoring separately, adding our comments, sending it to you, and you're compiling it? Do you imagine that each of the panelists there's no reason for us to present, it seems odd. But anyhow, what are you thinking about that? And then once I'm under the assumption that we're going to want to bring people in person, because I think you learn that much more when you're able to ask questions and hear from them directly. Do we then rescore based on that information?
I think those are good questions. I'll give you my best thinking and we can go from there. So what I was envisioning is after you score, we would provide you with some sort of data summary on what you did. Like, we wouldn't necessarily say who those people are. You'd be reviewer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These were the total, like, these were the scores. Like, this is who was first, this is who was second, who was third. We would also provide you information around who got the highest score in each sort of subcategory. And then I think you would be able to see if, like, maybe on the rubric, it's clear that you've met the threshold as prescribed by the law by a large margin. Let's say 6 of you all picked the same one as one. So then you would have to figure out whether it was worth your time to go in and do additional interviews. But if it was close, you could talk that. If it was like, I think that information will tell you how you want to proceed if going to interview all 3, to interview 2, to maybe interview none. And to see if you have met already the threshold, because we're giving you the opportunity to deliberate. On the actual interview process, I did not contemplate you scoring their interview presentation.
No, yeah. I'm sorry to
No.
interrupt. I didn't mention while they're interviewing, but after the fact, sometimes you have the opportunity to reassess your rubric overall for that application.
I think that that's something that we would be more than happy to entertain. I think that would be, we would give you an opportunity to maybe true up based on your information or to make any revisions, and then we would do another recalculation to see where you are. That's something, if that is the consensus of the group of how they want to move forward, we can certainly do that. Are there other questions? Okay. And then other supports. Other supports that you might be thinking about that you might need. We've had. It sounds like you all bring a lot of interesting expertise as a whole. You are experts in education, you're experts in quantitative analysis, you're experts in data and how data systems work. But are there particular areas where you might need additional support? You'd like to hear from certain people about what best practices? Are there documents that we should think about sharing with you about other research practice partnerships? Anything that might help you make your decision? Remember, it is me and Nagesh. But if there's people that might provide you expertise over something in the NOI that's just like, I have no idea what this is. But the reason I did not include that up front is because it seems like what I know about each of you all have a strong threshold knowledge to do what to do to make the decision. Thoughts
I
on
think
that,
that sharing, oh, sorry. I think
Go
sharing that additional information on other RPPs would be helpful. I didn't know if there were maybe even some other vision statements about, maybe what leadership had in mind for this practice. I know, we did a great job of covering like our requirements, but are there additional pieces of information that we should have in mind as we review?
Sure, and I think this might be a place for Akeem as well, because he managed the legislative process on this. We could share the committee report, which has an exhaustive narrative of how the legislation came to pass. You could see, testimony. You could see that's also in the public record. Go on LIMS and find that, but I can give that to you as well to sort of, you can get what the public is thinking. You can get what different stakeholders were thinking in the process. The other piece is that I believe in the committee report, and that there are a few organizations, there are some RPPs out there, and that information is all footnoted in there in sort of the storytelling. So I think the committee report might be a way to fulfill that, and I can pass that around after the meeting.
Yeah, I think you'd want to look at, I don't know if the Cal committee report had as much detail as the Committee on Education committee report did, but I do think it's worth looking at both of them. I think I would look at the Cal as a supplement to some of the depth from the Committee on Education committee report.
Great.
And then too, I know, like, throughout the legislative history of this matter, there were a few partnerships that people like a lot of people discuss, particularly the one in Chicago. We could share the information in Chicago. There's also a partnership in Tennessee. We could also share information about the information in Tennessee, and then any others that you identify, we could have some sort of like running repository of these things for you to look at. And then I do believe that there were a few sort of like primers by a few organizations. It's been a long time since we did this, but there were a few primers about white paper type documents about setting these up that I think are also reflected in the committee reports as well, and other testimony.
Sorry, Justin. I was just going to add that this would be in the Ed committee report. I believe that we provided testimony on the NOI hearing, and also gosh, this was so long ago, but before the council members took a trip to Chicago, we provided a memo by request on, with background information on RPP practices and things like that. Happy to share that if that's useful.
Sure.
And of course, there's also the this is not available, but relevant to mention that in the RPP Act is the data audit included at the end, and part of the RFP for that also has an RPP best practices section tailored to DC context.
Got it. So I think probably what the next step might be is just setting up sort of a SharePoint document, and we'll put hyperlinks in sort of annotated bibliography describing what the document is, and then you can have access to it, and you can add things as well that you want to share with the group. Does that work?
Works for me.
Okay.
Thank you for doing that. In terms of process, are there any norms that we've already established about what constitutes a quorum? So how many of us will have to be at each of those meetings for those meetings to take place?
We did not establish that. I think that is something that you can entertain. Usually quorums are a majority. So that would be 4 of you. If that's a rule that we want to have. What I've been doing is when I sent out the invites, right, you had said, like in the second round, you had several dates that work for all of you, and I think I will strive to set the and I will tell you, like, hey, there's only 4 people that can do this. For 5 people, I might need some more dates, but like 4 works for me. But I'm going to work towards 6. And usually, what I did, I think I maybe did this a couple times with Susanna, is like, hey, maybe I think we're at 5. Like, could you rearrange? I can do that as an intermediary step 2 to try to work towards 6 all the time and let you know where the conflicts are. But we can, if we can't, we want to keep the time on 4. We could do 4.
I think 4 sounds good, but I think want it to be 2 council and 2 executive, or whatever balance we need to get to actually reach a consensus to pass the select an organization for the proposal, so that we're reflecting what's established in the legislation and what we need to actually get to consensus.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah,
I've not had to get to that level of detail because it's been working out on the scheduling front, but in case it doesn't, I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb.
Yeah, I'd agree with Susanna on that one. If the law requires that 2 council side and 2 executive side agree, then I think we should have that as a quorum. I'd hate for us to be in a situation where the timing worked for 3 council side and then 1 executive side, and we count that as 4, but we're not at the like other people are missing out on that information, so it makes it difficult to get that 2 and 2.
So the quorum will be 4, equally divided between the council and the executives. Any other procedural matters?
Going back to just some of the supports or expertise, I don't know how in-depth the proposals are as it relates to data security and privacy, but I think it may be good to be able to have the ability to consult with either the CISO at Octo or some other expert in security protocols that we could all agree on, as I think a lot of these things are much more nuanced than people will present in these reports or in these kinds of applications. So it might be good to solicit additional information if that's allowable and have someone who's an expert in security review it. I don't know if that's allowed, but at a minimum, it would be good to be able to consult with someone on the things that at least I know the limits of my knowledge might be pushed.
Do you mean the security of the applications or the security of the underlying education
Transfers,
data?
The latter, yeah. So the storage, security, the access, especially, I think if just hearing the complexity of the partners that are in each application, if there are, say, 10 people or 10 entities that are supposed to have access to the data, that's a very complicated data sharing and system structure. So it might be something where we would want to know that it's being treated with the security that the applicants actually purport to have for it.
Yeah, and there's some great resources on to that point exactly on NERP's website, the National RPP Network. Like Houston has a really interesting setup where they have a different company managing, and then you know, highly controlled user access. Anyway, but they have some resources there about data security among multiple organizations.
So it sounds like that might be something that you would need sooner rather than later too for this initial review. Like thinking about, is this something that I need to think about more for next time before you score, or maybe before you interview, or you don't, as long as you get it, you don't care?
I wonder if it even couldn't be something that we dictate and they must all agree to if they didn't propose it.
Isn't there a section of the NOI that's all about data security?
There is. It's descriptive, but it's still high level. And it sounds like this question, it sounds like you want more like to dig deeper to make sure like the things are there or what questions to ask. But yes, Jen is correct. There is, you can see what we asked for in the NOI.
And yeah, sorry, I was assuming, Sam, that maybe incorrectly that your question was sort of as like a way for us to figure out if they know what they're talking about versus Rebecca, I agree. I mean, whoever the authorized representative would set, you know, whatever restrictions you feel are appropriate, no matter who is selected. So.
Yeah, that's more along the lines of what I was thinking, as someone to be able to verify that whatever they're proposing is going to meet a specific security standard. So that I think it kind of depends on how much detail they put in the application. But at that point, I would think at least after we've reviewed the applications and before we interview them, we would want to include some sort of consultation there, so we at least knew which questions we might want to follow up on the interview if there seemed to be any concerns from a security or sharing perspective.
That can be something that we think about and come back with. Maybe this is the approach. If you need, like, I also think like you don't know what supports you might need until you start digging in and start seeing.
Exactly. Yeah.
We can table this for now. Think about this one, but then open up the opportunity for you to think about other supports that you have. That can be an ongoing thing as well. But I think like the immediate next step that I'm hearing is our quorum rule, and then the bibliography type thing about the history and stakeholders and best practices. And then we can also, everybody can have access to that and drop links, and then we can clean it up and make it like functional. It's just something that you can use back and forth.
And also, I mean, certainly we can create, if we need to, a separate, you know, Teams channel or something, or you know, communications that may be offline, share information, you know, some of the information that Aaron and Sam were speaking of. And then relative to Sam's question around security and confidentiality, certainly OSSI has a number of protocols that we deploy in our contracts and agreements around confidentiality and use of the data, but then also the district requires many vendors that work in this space, especially with student data, cyber liability insurance, and ultimately that would be something that would be in the master services agreement that's contemplated following the selection.
Yeah, I think your earlier point, I think a Teams channel would be very helpful.
Excuse me, Susanna, what did you say?
Oh, that a Teams channel would be helpful to sort of overcome the weirdness of us all working remotely.
Okay.
I was just thinking, and maybe this is something that we'll see once we get the proposals, that these proposals were submitted in a pre-COVID era, and the NOI went out then as well. It's anticipating if there's changes that will have to be made to the proposals in response to this new working reality, or if working remotely really was just not something that was even addressed, so we don't need the proposals to reflect that.
So the proposals did not contemplate a global health pandemic, and did not contemplate the working conditions that we're in. But I think that might be something that if you decide to interview or to ask for additional information in context, like that's something that you can do. I mean, people are working remotely from a lot of different places, I'm sure, at some of these organizations, and on the issue of like how do you secure data in those sort of settings, I think that's a very reasonable question to ask. So I think that inquiry of getting additional detail might be a place for later on.
Yeah, great point, Suzanne. I would even add even some of the lack of data or inconsistencies in data that weren't unexpected because of COVID. There could be some interesting questions to ask around that as well.
And of course, the education environment has changed so dramatically that the things that we'd even be interested in the RPP looking into would be vastly different, perhaps.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's true. But I think that it's still about education. It's still about student achievement. It's still about instructional practices. I think that the council's vision still applies, like it's a very general vision, but then it also prescribed an advisory committee to set up this research agenda that is also appears, based on the stakeholders that would be on there, would be very responsive to the times that we're in, the challenges we're confronting. So I think this all makes sense. I think that so again, we have our quorum, we have our running list of resources. We can think through setting up this communication system, and we can think through how we sort of get some sort of assurance or verification around security and privacy going forward. It sounds like we're pretty much in agreement on how to get from point A to point B, and then if other issues arise, we can as they come about. I want to be mindful of time, where it's 1:30. I sent so on next steps, so housekeeping items. I sent 2 documents to you in your calendar invite for your review. One is a non-disclosure agreement that outlines many of the principles that we've discussed on the call today. And the other is regarding conflicts of interest. That is for your review. Should you have questions on, we wanted to give you those in draft. It's not e-sign ready yet, but we will send you an e-sign document, but we wanted to give you that to review. And then if you have questions, you can reach out. You should email both me and Nagesh, since that's also a legal matter. Also, as far as next steps, I will probably, by the end of the week, I will send another set of times for scheduling our next meeting sometime during the week of October 12th. Again, where we are is we will, at that meeting, we will provide you with access to the applications. We're in the process of getting proprietary review by the applicants. And then we will provide you with access to those. We will provide you with a sample rubric for your discussion. We'll provide you with a system to like log your scores and come back to us. Are there any other things for the good of the order?
No, just big thank you to you and Nagesh for pulling all this together and organizing the group. Really appreciate it. It was very easy to follow, and thank you.
All right, no problem. All right, you have 30 minutes of time back. Don't do anything crazy.
Thank you.
All right, bye you all.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, everyone.